In 1896, the state of Utah was admitted to the Union. At that time, the federal government took ownership of many parts of Utah with a promise to return the lands to the state in due time. This also happened to many other states when they entered the Union. It has been almost 120 years since that time. We still have not received back the land. The most dramatic effect of the government's management of Utah lands is the lack of revenue being placed back into the Utah economy, thus making it more difficult to properly back basic functions such as education. There is a big gap in the funds going to education in Utah and the funds going to the education programs in other states that have control over their resources.
The federal government didn't honor its promise to Utah, and so Utah is $2.2 billion away from average in per pupil funding for its children. Utah's another $2.2 billion away from competing with states where the federal government did honor its promise and they do have access to their lands and their resources to provide jobs, to generate a tax base, to fund essential government services. So where's the line for adequately educating our children, for unleashing full employment in our state, for growing the economic pie not only in our state but also throughout the nation, and for securing the self-determination of our state? So here's the line, the arbitrary line. For all of the states east of Colorado, the promise was the same, and the federal government honored that promise to timely dispose of title to all the public lands. For all the states west, the promise is the same, only the performance is different. What's really interesting is a lot of people say, well, you states in the west are just different somehow without explaining why. And yet look at Hawaii, to our far west. The federal government disposed of all of the land to Hawaii, and they control all of their lands and all of their resources. And yet somehow, our children in Utah aren't as good as the children in North Dakota. Our children aren't as good as the children in Kansas or in Oklahoma. Our children aren't entitled to have the same opportunities to responsibly manage the resources and responsibly manage our lands, to provide for education, to provide for a growing economy, and to provide for the self-determination of our state.
I think it's kind of ridiculous. Just looking at like the major difference that you can see between like any of the eastern states versus the western states.
Well, I think the federal government having the national parks are great beauty and do need to be protected. But all the rest of the federal land that they have, I think needs to be turned over to the state. Maybe not all of it, but as a resident of Utah, I should have a say in how Utah land is managed.
I am of the opinion that the states can do a much better job in regulating their own lands simply by nature of the fact that we live here. It's in our best interest to protect things that we feel are valuable. For me, there is no upside in having the federal government own, mismanage, and control any lands in any state. I just think that the only thing that the federal government can and should do is defend my life and protect my liberties. And I can't see how them saying, no, you can't drill on a piece of property in my home state is defending my life or protecting my liberty. I think that's the only thing the federal government could and should do, and I think everything else they're getting wrong.
Utah is a public land state. It's always going to be a public land state. The real issue that we're trying to do is getting more decisions on that land being done by Utahns.
Now is your opportunity to act. Do you believe that the federal government should give back the land and resources it manages to the state of Utah? Or do you feel that the federal government should maintain control over land that it already manages? It is important, no matter what your opinion is, to be heard. So vote. Make your voice heard. Write to your representatives and share how you feel the lands of Utah should be handled.